Welcome to this webinar on LoRa and location, unlocking new value for Internet of Things solutions. I'm David Pringle. We're going to start with a panel discussion. We're going to move to a brief presentation about how the technology works, and then we're going to come back to a further panel discussion about how it's actually being deployed in practice. Now, with me in the studio, I've got Richard Lansdowne from Semtech. I've got Brian Witowski from Comcast and Simon Philipson from KPN. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Richard, let's get some context here on the big picture. So why is location important in the context of the Internet of Things? Why do we need location information?
I think location information has been important right from the days of telematics and M2M historically, but what's new now is the ability to detect and predict deviations, to really to look much wider context and to use that data to bring added value.
Okay, and Brian, from your perspective, why is location important?
I think there's a great opportunity to create efficiencies for businesses and government and other entities. I mean, people are tracking assets today. They're manually verifying, they're scanning them, barcodes. But if we're able to make that much more efficient and take that data to the cloud, we can create great efficiencies for those entities.
Okay, now Simon, let's talk a little bit about some use cases. When we think of the Internet of Things, we often think of static connected devices. But
right.
Explain why we might need location in that context.
Yeah. Well, that's actually the first question that customers ask themselves: where are my assets? And as we see now with LoRa Geolocation, there's a whole new way of possibilities for new IoT solutions. For example, asset management on devices that don't, on solutions and on assets that don't have power availability. You can now, with LoRa Geolocation, you can allocate your asset costs on different projects, on certain projects, and a retrieval of assets. Things get lost, things get stolen.
Okay, Brian, give us a couple of use cases that are top of mind for you.
As Simon said, asset tracking for sure. I think geofencing is a great benefit. Like, hey, tell me when something leaves my facility or when it comes back in. And there are solutions out there that do that today, but we think LoRa can do that more efficiently and cost effectively.
Okay, so Richard, yeah, we've got a lot of location information out there. We've got GPS, we've got Bluetooth beacons, we've got Wi-Fi, etc. Why do we need another source of location information?
I think you've got to think this isn't just about track and trace. It's opening a whole new section, a whole new segment to the market, and we've got different technologies that we can now, using an underlying, essentially lowest power possible technology, we can use this to determine when we're going to use some of the other technologies based on position, time, or events. So it's not just about track and trace, it's about the whole big data concept and bringing in geotagged data for management and prediction of all kinds of things.
Okay. Now, Simon, using LoRa in this context, are there advantages over using GPS, for example?
Yes, definitely. What we see with a customer of ours, he has a lot of assets that are moving through the whole country, and they're outdoor, but they're also indoor. And with indoor location, we see that GPS doesn't always work. With LoRa location, it works. Not per se very accurate, but that doesn't really have to be necessary all the time if you use geofencing, like Brian said.
Yeah. So now a big thing here, Brian, I guess, is the power consumption and the cost in a lot of these contexts. Talk us through LoRa from that perspective. What's the implications for power?
I think it's huge. I mean, when you look at the other devices today, not only is it power hungry, but they're big devices. And big devices don't work necessarily if you want to have it on a mobile asset or maybe a child or a pet. And the smaller and less battery you can put in the device, the more use cases you can open up.
Okay. And Richard, let's talk money for a little bit. Are customers prepared to pay for location data? If I'm an operator, will my enterprise customers or consumers pay to know where these things are?
For sure. We've seen some studies which suggest that potentially the operator can double their revenue based on this kind of data. And it's, like I say, it's not just about track and trace, it's about a return on investment that's coming in, even network management, by detecting where you've got anomalies in your network, by all kinds of geotag crowd-sourced data. You can leverage return on investment in many ways.
Okay, and there's not a huge cost implication from deploying this technology?
No, typically, if you've deployed a network for deep indoor, which is where most people are trying to get their IoT networks to serve deep indoor, when you come outside, you can see enough base stations or gateways that it works outside without any real extra investment.
So Richard, tell us a little bit about how this technology actually works.
Well, I've got a few slides hopefully that appear on the screen and help us out a little bit. The first thing to understand about a LoRa system is that it doesn't operate in the same way a cellular system or a Wi-Fi system works, where a device talks to a particular base station or a particular access point. LoRa is like all gateways or base stations are like microphones. They're all listening. They hear everything that goes on. So a sensor will wake up and transmit its data. When you're in range of more than one, it's received on more than one. And all of those messages are sent to the central, the server. When we have the same packet received from multiple gateways, we can use how we receive that packet to work out the location. So we've deployed in our second generation of gateways some specific hardware. We've got more than a dozen partners who are building that hardware, and Simon here has deployed nationwide with this hardware that has specific software and hardware then to timestamp the packet when it comes in. Yeah. So it's a very accurate timestamp, and other signal parameters are captured at the same time, signal to noise and received signal strength, and that's all sent to the algorithms that are going to calculate the position. So one of the biggest problems we have, particularly in an urban environment, is that a signal doesn't travel directly from the sensor to the gateway. It bounces around, particularly when you've got tall buildings, etc. So we have problems with what we call multipath in radio. So the signal arrives maybe from more than one direction or via more than one path. And separating those out is probably the biggest technological difficulty we have in the system. So we try to mitigate that by sending more than one packet, or by sending it more than once over time, or more antennas. There's various techniques that we use to try to mitigate that. And then the solver, the thing that actually computes the position at the end of the day, has some very sophisticated algorithms to try to understand, has this packet been distorted or gone a long way around, and maybe throw some data away, or maybe weight it in a different way when you combine it. So it's all really the power of development, and of course these things get better over time. But one of the things that's worth noting is that IoT devices can't move. Therefore, a sensor requires coverage in every spot. When you lose signal on your cell phone, you walk to the window and bingo, it comes back. A device can't walk. So networks are deployed with deep indoor coverage in mind, and when they're deployed with deep indoor coverage, as soon as you get towards the window or outside, you can see, or you're in range of multiple gateways. So typically, we're not seeing a massive densification of the network required in order to get geolocation up and running. Of course, the more gateways you deploy, the more signals are received, the more that the algorithms have to work with, and the better the solution. So we have some accuracy measurements that we've seen and in the trials, and we see in rural areas in the few tens of meters, and in the city and urban areas in the more 100, 150 meter type range, which people think a lot about accuracy, and because they get a certain amount of accuracy with today's solution that they have, anything worse than that is clearly useless, whereas most use cases don't require a specific an accuracy like that. You can use a much lower accuracy for all kinds of things, and I'm sure my friends here will come up with some good use cases that don't require pinpoint accuracy.
Okay, so and this is more than just theory; it's actually being deployed in the real world. Is that right?
Yeah, we've been doing some very interesting work with the guys over in the port of Cork, actually. A couple of initial very easy to deploy use cases was apparently 20% of containers you see being shipped around are empty. They're just relocating empty containers from one place to another. And imagine you've got some business coming in and you don't have the container available, the inventory management of empty containers is a big deal. So having sensors you can just stick onto empty containers and start to manage the inventory is already showing an ROI of the cost of deployment. In about 2 months they get their money back, which is quite impressive. So, and one other thing I guess they're doing over there is refrigerated container management. Today, it's pretty basic. A container comes into the port, you plug it in, and you go around, and every few hours you have to write on the form what's the reading. It's a perfect use case for IoT. Get the container to report its own status.
Yeah.
So again, the ROI comes there in just a few months.
Yeah. Okay. No, sounds compelling. Brian, let's hear a little bit about how Comcast is actually deploying the technology. Have you got a live network?
We do. We've announced 3 trial markets in various states of deployment. Some we're fully deployed in a large city. Others are a little further down the chain. We've seen a ton of interest for geolocation for clients we've talked to. Really excited about the opportunity. One simple use case we enabled was a tourism company that runs a fleet of buses. Certainly have looked at GPS over the years and haven't ever launched a service with it. Either it's too expensive or there's a lot of inaccuracy because of urban canyoning when they're next to small skyscrapers. They lose geolock and they lose where the bus is. So we've enabled LoRa enabled sensors on their buses, and key use case for them is the users of the bus want to know when the next bus is coming through. So we worked with them to develop a customer-facing app that'll easily pull up and show a user when the next bus is coming, so they're not getting angry calls or frustrated people getting rained on when the next bus is coming through.
And the ultimate end game for them is more usage of their buses, I guess. If people know when they're coming, they're more likely to use them.
Yeah, and a great marketing message, better service, and for them it was solving that particular need, and they see further uses for fleet management that they'll work into the system over time.
The same principle, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Simon, in the Netherlands, where are you at in terms of deploying this technology?
We have actually reached nationwide coverage last year in July. We were one of the first in the world. And since then, we've densified our network for deep indoor coverage, and also to make sure that everywhere you can localize your assets through geolocation. And we're doing a lot of pilots now on geolocation, and we hope to put the commercial feature live soon.
Okay. Now we're hearing a little bit about B2B use cases. Are there consumer use cases here?
Yes, definitely. And for example, KPN does business in the Netherlands, and we're a bicycle country. We have more bicycles than there's inhabitants. So I believe there's 18 million bicycles in the Netherlands. 1.3 million bicycles are being bought every year, and we heard that 700,000 bicycles get stolen or lost every year, and only 7% of those 700,000 is retrieved. So there's a huge potential there, not only in the consumer side, but also on the insurer side and on the security side. So.
Okay, so that's you haven't deployed that yet, but that's a clear.
Yeah, I think especially in the Netherlands, when we announced LoRa, we've been talking to so many different solution providers. We've contracted 2 solution providers that actually already have a LoRa geolocation solution ready for bicycles specifically, and they are selling that and they're piloting that with rental companies.
Okay. Okay. Now, Brian, what about consumer use cases for you in the US? You see consumer demand for this?
No, absolutely. I mean, if you're 13 to 65, there's like almost 100% chance you have a cell phone and you have some semblance of geolocation. But there's 2 large groups that don't own cell phones: kids under 13 and a lot of the elderly over 65. And for them to get geolocation, that needs to be simple. It can't be a big bulky device. It can't have to be recharged every few days. And so we think there's a real opportunity to create a LoRa-enabled service where where you would have kid tracking, elderly, fall prevention, maybe even pets at some point. And we think with that device, you would really get a lot of traction. And for us as a cable operator, we have video service, internet service, home security and automation. The opportunities to integrate that kind of service really is great. I mean, for us at Comcast on our X1 platform, we have a voice remote, and people use that every day to search for their favorite TV show or sports team or whatever. For us to be able to say, where's my kid, and have it appear on your TV screen is just a killer use case. So we're working towards developing those ideas.
In that context, the size of the module is key, I guess. It's got to be pretty small for a pet or a child.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only the size, but for GPS, you need line of sight to a satellite. If you're a kid, you might not want them to wear a necklace or a band or put something, we'll put it in their backpack or something mobile. And if you can just kind of put it in there and forget about it, but the functionality there, and you're not recharging it every few days, that's where we think then you'll get real market demand from that consumer group.
Richard, let's just touch a little bit on this concept of using it, this technology in the context of a smart home. I mean, why would you want to use it in the smart home if you've got a Wi-Fi network, for example?
I think we see this in South Korea. One of the reasons that South Korea Telecom deployed a nationwide network in the space of 12 weeks is because they truly believe that the population's ready for it. They're very smart home, very well deployed with smart home already, but they're, as a nation, migrating over towards LoRa because it doesn't have a reliance on that backhaul connection which you provide. And so, particularly if it's fire, if it's any kind of alarm status, you can still get the alarm out of the building even without the cable.
Yeah, okay, so you won't get a burglar cutting your fixed connection or whatever. Yeah, okay. Let's talk a little bit about how easy this technology is to deploy. I mean, once you've got a LoRa network, Simon, how do you turn this on?
Well, it's actually an upgrade on the software side, not on the hardware side. So that's the interesting thing. Of course, you got to have the right gateways for that, for the geolocation feature, and make sure your whole professional services is covered behind it, like security and service levels and whatnot.
Yeah.
But it's fairly easy.
Okay. I also want to know a better understanding of the power consumption in practice. If we had a mobile tracker device, for example, I mean, how much power is it consuming to figure out the location? Is it, does it really impinge on the battery life? Right.
I think that even if you are sharing your data very frequently, you'll get long battery life. But there's some sophistication we can do on the software side. So only track my location if I'm moving, or turn off from midnight to 6 a.m. because I'm sleeping during that period. And I think with some sophistication on that side, you can really extend that battery life for year plus, and that. If you then can get a lithium-ion battery, you're not doing a disposable rechargeable battery. Again, that's just making it easier for the consumer is going to help speed adoption of the service.
Yeah, because one of the big issues with GPS is battery consumption. So we saw that with Pokemon Go, for example.
Right, and of course, every technology that we've had until today is, apart from basic cell ID stuff, requires something to happen on the sensor to transmit some data to the network. What we're now saying here is that your sensor may be just transmitting a temperature, something, it's doing its job, and in the act of doing its job, you now locate it. So from the network side, it's the only totally passive, from the sensor perspective, it's utterly passive.
Yeah.
So you have the choice now to have sensors with different hardware available in there, with potentially some of the more traditional geolocation technologies built in. You can now determine when to use them based on position, time, events, triggers. So you could have a GPS device with a 10-year battery life.
Yeah.
Because you only use it when you need it.
Yeah, it's an automatic side benefit of having the connectivity in the first
Correct.
place. Yeah. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about what exciting use cases we might see in the future. Putting our thinking caps on, getting creative. Richard, how might you deploy this technology in the future?
I think one of the interesting things that we saw in Korea was sensors underneath manhole covers. They look to see the level of the water in the sewer. So saying, okay, great, we can detect if the manhole cover is off or stolen or tipped up, and you can go and make basic safety.
Right. Yeah.
And you can potentially recover a stolen device. But what if we now start geotagging the data from all the manhole covers? We could detect a storm surge and have a very tangible benefit on the cost of preventing floods and the safety aspect. So it's a real win-win situation by using the power of geotag data that was coming anyway.
Yeah. So, Brian, essentially we're going to get potentially a lot more granular information than we've ever had in the past.
Yeah, and it's a function of the cost and the battery life. As we can, with Semtech and LoRa and the operators, we can drive the cost of that device down. We'll see more and more use cases come online. I think for us, where we're thinking 2, 3, even 5 years out, if we can make this the LoRa device cheap and battery efficient enough, if you could put this on every package in the U.S. and the U.K. and Europe, it's an amazing excitement around that. If you could, very accurately track that device from the warehouse through the fleet to the end user, and then, the end user, someone took it off my stoop. I can verify that happened, and it's over here, and then I'm not arguing with the company that I never received the package. Like those kind of use cases that improve users' lives, make things more efficient. I think that's what we're really getting excited about the long-term value of this.
Okay, so does that sound realistic to you?
Yes, definitely, and it's something we also see in an interesting use case, which we're doing with a couple of logistical companies. They have a truck and they already localize their truck most of the times through GPS and 3G because there's power consumption possible, but they do not yet localize their containers, and especially they do not localize their pallets yet or even their parcels. And we see that they're starting with the containers, they're starting with the pallets, and probably in a year or so from now, they're doing the parcels itself as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No, exciting times ahead. Right. We're going to just wrap up, Rich, by asking you: do you see a time when we know the location of every single asset that we own? Will we know where every single thing is?
Absolutely, yes.
Good. Okay. Well, that's a good place to conclude our discussion. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.